Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to the audio version of Tales from the Triverse, my science fiction, fantasy, detective serial. Today's chapter is Voices from the Gallery. And what you need to know is that the former SDC detectives have reunited in Addis. It's the first time Lola Stiles has been outside of Palinor, and that the others have risked travelling back to mid-Earth. Lola has been filling them in on her adventures. Addis Ababa, 1980, February. Kaminsky's fingers danced on the table, tappity-tap, a distraction from the lack of having anything to hold between his fingers. Max Earth had weaned him off the worst of his cigarettes, but he still liked to have something with which to fidget. He picked up a drinks coaster from the table and started flipping it from side to side. "You know," he said, leaning back in his seat, "I really thought the Vaxia thing was going to explain your new look." "Right," Holland said, from the end of the long conference table. "That was disappointing." Chakraborty glared at him. "Frank, for fuck's sake." She turned to Lola, who was sat with a wry smile on her face. "But yes, please do explain." "I'm getting to it," Lola said. "There's not really a way to do a short version of all this." Letting out a loud, slow breath, Holland crossed his arms. "So I guess there's no skipping to the end." "Not really." Lola poured herself a glass of water, glanced over at Clark, who was sat with his fingers laced together, a deep frown furrowing his face. Kaminsky was still marvelling at the five of them being in the same room. 5 years had gone by in a flash, the distance between then and now seeming insurmountable. The SDC was a distant memory, temporally and spatially. It was the old life. In a lot of ways things had improved for him and Nisha. They had a comfortable life, Nisha was healthy again, Max Earth medicine had swiftly sorted out the remaining nerve damage from the Dopur poison, and they were getting by just fine. Nobody was after them. They lived day to day doing odd jobs around the local area, the sole wage keeping a roof over their head and bread on the table. "So who was it that you met?" he asked. "Slava? Who is that?" "Myroslava," Lola said, as if that explained everything. She shook her head impatiently, as if it was ridiculous that they didn't already know. "She's a spy, or assassin. I'm never sure which. Perhaps both. She's with the rebellion." Holland snorted while suppressing a laugh. "The what now?" "The rebellion," Lola said, ignoring his tone. "It's a movement that's been building across western and southern Palinor for decades, slowly. In the last 6-7 years, they've started making themselves known. You sure you haven't been reading too many fantasy novels, Stiles?" Lola looked at Clark, then thumbed a finger in Holland's direction. "He hasn't changed, then." "I don't really do change, Stiles, love." Kaminsky lifted a hand. "Come on," he said, gently. He pointed at Holland. "He might say that, but that man changed at exactly the right moment. Saved all our asses." "Yeah, and look where it got me. Exiled to the fucking future for the rest of my days." Holland grinned that shit-eating grin of his. "Could be worse, though." "You could be dead," Clark said, speaking for the first time since Lola had started telling her story. "This Myroslava and the rebellion, how does that fit into everything else?" "You've met some of them before," Lola said, smiling knowingly. "I have?" "When we were in Brulia together, for the prisoner escort, remember? In the market? There was nearly a fight." Clark frowned. "The princess saw them off. Was that the rebellion?" "Some of them." "Christian was the one giving the speeches." "Ah," Clark said with a nod. "I thought he was a bit of a cock." "Probably fair. Princess Yana was there. She's married to Myroslava. Maxim would have been there, I think." Suddenly her eyes lit up. "Wait, I should have said first. You'll never guess who else I've met." "You're right," drawled Holland, rolling his eyes. "I can't guess." "Pilpo and Zlati were newer recruits when I joined. They knew Larissa." "Who the fuck is Larissa?" Holland leaned on the desk, not trying to hide his evident boredom. The name caught in Kaminsky's memory. "Wait, why do I know that name?" "Oh," said Chakraborty, hammering on the table. "The girl that washed up on the banks of the Thames. We were on the case. That was a Larissa, wasn't it?" "Not just that," Kaminsky said, looking to Clark. The older man was pinching the bridge of his nose, his jaw set tightly. That was one of Callahan's last cases too, missing person. That's what led him to the human trafficking, which got him close to figuring out the routes they were using to ship the component pieces for the new AI megaship. Holland whistled, long and low. All right, this just got interesting. Sounds like you made some interesting contacts after all, Styles. Detective Burhane stood and took a step forward from where he'd been lurking on a chair in the corner of the room. I suggest we all take a break. I've arranged for coffee, some food. It's available in the room next to this one. No need to go back out into the station. Not needing to be told twice, Holland was the first through the doors, muttering on his way out. Too many fucking names, if you ask me. Lola was about to follow Kaminsky and Chakraborty through to the other room when she realised this was likely the best moment to talk to Clark. Can you give us a moment? She asked Burhane, who smiled, nodded, and discreetly closed the doors behind him. I still can't believe you're here, Clark said, looking a little dazed. There were times I didn't think I'd see any of you again. She looked up at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the moment. For the longest time I thought you were all in prison. It was a close thing. His face never looked anything but grumpy and tired, but behind those sunken, creased eyes, she could see that he was happy. He indicated her arms. I don't know what this is, he said, gesturing. Are you okay, Lola? I think I am, she said, her nerves fraying a little. It's not been easy. These years have been harder than I could have imagined. They weren't what I thought they would be. She was avoiding getting to the point. She didn't know how he'd react, and part of her wanted to hold back, to not say anything, not yet, just in case. Is there something else? Clark wasn't a fool. He could tell she was stalling. Is there a reason we're standing here when everyone else is getting their lunch? Listen, Clark, she said. There's a lot to explain still. She waved her arms, obviously, but there's something else that I wanted to talk to you about. He could tell she was worried. Of course, it's been 5 years, Lola, no point holding anything back. Taking a deep breath, she ran on the spot a little, paced back and forth, as if readying herself for a sprint. She'd practiced this in her head over and over, yet in the moment all the words escaped her. I don't want things to change between us. Things have changed, Lola, Clark said, throwing his arms wide, but I'll always have your back. You'll always be my partner. Okay then. Another deep breath. Okay. She tried to focus, to get it all in the right order. Okay. Clark smiled, kindly. Take your time. Right. A nervous laugh escaped, and she grimaced, feeling increasingly like an ineloquent teenager. I'm gay. He stared at her, nonplussed, or shocked, perhaps, for several seconds. They felt like minutes. Then he leaned on the table with one arm, ran the other hand along his jaw, and laughed. That's it? What do you mean, that's it? This is a big deal for me, telling you. No, I understand that, he said, still chuckling. But why were you so worried? I thought it was going to be something bad. Lola's stomach was lurching. She felt giddy. I didn't know how you'd react. How did you think I'd react? I don't know. I thought you might find it weird. He nodded. So, you like women. I can't say that I understand, but Lola? It's none of my business. You shouldn't concern yourself with what I think. Clark rubbed his jaw again. Maybe back in the day I'd have reacted differently, but not now. If it makes you happy, then I'm happy. End of story. The relief washed over her. She felt tears brewing and pushed them back in. You're the first person I've told on Mid-Earth. Another laugh from Clark. That's quite the honour. Why me? She looked down at the carpet. I don't know. You matter to me? She'd been weighed down by the anticipation, had feared his reaction more than most of the beasts she'd faced on Palinor, save perhaps for what had happened in Lairn. Ridiculous, she recognised, and it wasn't that she wanted or needed his approval, but she did need him as a friend for what was coming next. All right, let's not get carried away. He put a big arm around her shoulders, and she was back 5 years ago. Not that they'd been tight friends at the time, but absence had shifted both of them to a new connection. Clark patted his stomach. I need a sandwich. They'd better do sandwiches here. Lola smiled and felt safe, just for a moment. The fight was still to come, and she had to convince them to help her with the museum, and there was so much more to tell about what had happened to her on Palinor, but the scariest part, at least, was done. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed that. You can find a lot more and behind-the-scenes author notes and all of that stuff over on the newsletter at simonkjones.substack.com.